Joining us now is Melissa Murray, MS Now, legal analyst, NYU law professor, and author of the brand new book, The U.S. Constitution, a comprehensive and annotated guide for the modern reader, that is on my bedside table. And I did crack open and read the first chapter, Melissa, but I'm not done yet. I'm going to finish it this week. It's on the list. But I want to ask you about John Roberts' claim that the justices are not partisan political actors. What do you make of that?
Jackie, I think it takes real cheek for Chief Justice John Roberts to say this just a few weeks after Adam Liptak and Jodi Kantor of the New York Times published that blockbuster story that showed that the Chief Justice is apparently neutral, nonpartisan member of the court, was really actively pushing for a massive departure from the court's accepted shadow docket procedures in order to stop the Obama Clean Power Plan based on very thin record evidence, actually evidence that was outside of the record, because he was annoyed that certain EPA administrators appeared to be going against something the court had said earlier. And in fact, like, they were just making statements, as is their wont, about how the EPA is operating. But Chief Justice John Roberts led the charge for this, and those memos that were published in the New York Times shows that clearly. The whole idea that Americans are just reflexively thinking that the court is partisan with no reason is absolutely baseless. We have seen over the last 5 years how this court has been inconsistent. Take, for example, just this week, this court allowed its decision in Louisiana versus Calais to go into effect almost immediately because the state of Louisiana asked it to. Usually the court takes 32 days to certify an opinion, but here, at the request of Louisiana, who is rapidly changing its electoral landscape in order to redraw its maps to disenfranchise Black voters, the court allowed this decision to go into effect immediately. When this court had a similar case back in 2022, Allen versus Milligan, same question about whether the state of Alabama should have drawn an extra opportunity district for minority voters. The court allowed that impermissible map to be used in the midterm election, the election that ultimately led to the Democrats losing the House of Representatives. And then they later, in June of 2023, invalidated it. So yes, there's a good reason for the public to think this court, the 6-3 conservative supermajority, is acting in a partisan fashion. And the Chief Justice, I think, has lost the plot here.
Melissa, I was as Jackie was reading that script and reading what the Chief Justice said, I started writing things down. He said the Americans have the wrong idea. They don't have an accurate understanding. They don't grasp as much as is appropriate that we are not partisan or political actors. He is, and this is part of the problem that Americans, everyday Americans, have with elites, is that everything is you couldn't possibly understand. You don't get it. Well, let's see why Americans think that, to your point. Examples of conservative justices blurring the lines with political speeches. This is Fox News from April 16th. Justice Thomas warns progressivism is a threat to America in rare public remarks. In unusually political speech, Alito says liberals pose threat to liberty. So maybe he should talk to the folks that sit near him about whether or not they're supposed to be political actors. They have gutted the Voting Rights Act, as you said. They got rid of Roe v. Wade. The list goes on and on, things that impact our politics in ways that they know. What does it say to you when Roberts is out there defending his court while they're making these kinds of decisions, while the American people trust them less and less, trust the judicial process less and less, and doing it with this kind of haughty tone of, you're too dumb to get it?
So, one, I think you're exactly right. This is, frankly, just elitism. Americans are just too dumb to figure out what we're really doing, and they don't understand that we're just simply applying the law here. Sir, it's not that Americans are dumb. It's that it looks like you're doing politics and not law. Separately, I will just say this court, the evidence speaks for itself. In the years that this court has had a conservative 6-3 supermajority, it has overruled a precedent, right? It overruled Roe versus Wade in 2022. It overruled the affirmative action decisions in 2023. It overruled Chevron, that case dealing with administrative agencies, in 2024. It gutted the Voting Rights Act this year. The evidence is right there, and the Chief Justice knows this. What this says to me is that this court reads its own press. It knows that the people are watching. It knows that we have questions. It knows that we are criticizing them. And they also recognize the limits of their own authority. This court is not like Congress. It's not like the president. It lacks the power of the purse. It lacks the power of the sword. It has no way to enforce its own decisions other than the people believing that what it does is legitimate, which is why every time they step out and play in our faces, they then have to turn around and do this kind of press tour where they defend themselves.
All this before he goes up to Congress with his hands out asking for more money.
Well, they just give it to him because what is Congress? Staffing arm of the executive. But anyway, Melissa, so Democrats in Virginia were really excited because they were able to get through a redistricting maps, and then the state Supreme Court comes in and says, nope, they can't go into place. And now the Virginia Democrats are appealing the ruling against redistricting to the U.S. Supreme Court. This is from NBC4 headline from Friday. Put your constitutional lawyer hat on. How worried should people be that the Supreme Court is going to stand in the way of the voters of Virginia who approved what happened?
Yeah, I think it's really important, Jonathan, to emphasize here that the voters of Virginia voted not once but twice for this shift. They voted first for an amendment to their constitution to suspend the Independent Redistricting Commission in order to allow the state legislature to draw a new redistricting map in order to counteract the Republican redistricting that the President of the United States has requested and has received from red states all across the country. And then they voted a second time for the map itself. So it's essentially two votes that happened in this referendum election. Direct democracy, the people going to the ballot box, not speaking through their state legislatures, but speaking directly to, at the ballot box as the voters themselves. And now we have this Republican-controlled Supreme Court of Virginia overturning the map on the view that somehow this violates certain procedures that have to be in place. This is the people speaking. It's a truly democratic action, and this unelected court has thwarted it. Now it's going to the U.S. Supreme Court, a court which on many occasions, dealing with questions of redistricting, including in Texas just a few months ago, has literally moved in favor of consolidating Republican advantage. I think the people of Virginia should be very concerned, but they should also be heartened, right? It took the people speaking out, and then they had this movement from their state Supreme Court. This is a state Supreme Court that is chosen by the state legislature. The people of Virginia, by changing the constitution of their state legislatures, can take steps to change the composition of this court. And we have to think about that. It's not just the presidential election. It's not just Congress. We have to focus on every election because all of these elections affect every institution of government.
Melissa Murray, brilliant lawyer and author of the new book, The U.S. Constitution, a comprehensive and annotated guide for the modern reader. Congrats on the release. There it is, showing off that book. Thank you for coming back to the weekend.